She thought she was the only one, but when she traded me for his money, she didn't know I was the one who made her rich in the first place. I can still hear her laughter in my head. That mocking little chuckle when she told me she'd found someone who could give her more than I ever could. She didn't even hesitate when she said it. As if I had been nothing but a stepping stone, a wallet she could drain until something shinier came along. What she never realized was this: every designer dress she flaunted, every luxury dinner she posted online, every so-called achievement she bragged about, it all came from me. My sweat. My sacrifices. My money. She thought leaving me for her new mentor was her victory. But the truth? That was the very moment she lost. Because I wasn't just her lover. I was her foundation. I built the stage she performed on. And I was about to rip it right out from under her. By the time she realized what I had planned, she would be broke, humiliated, and forgotten. And the cruelest part? She'd learned she was never my only rich lover to begin with. Before everything unraveled, before I saw her true face, my life was simple, hard, but mine. I wasn't born into money. Every dollar I had, I bled for. I worked 14-hour shifts, ran errands for bosses who didn't even remember my name, and when I finally scraped together enough to invest in my own ventures, I lived on instant noodles and tap water just to keep the lights on. And then I met her. She wasn't glowing with wealth or power. No, she was broke, barely holding on to a waitress job at some rundown cafe, with overdue bills stuffed in her purse like skeletons she couldn't hide. But she had something, a spark. A kind of hunger in her eyes that reminded me of myself back when I was still clawing my way up. The first night I walked her home, she confessed through trembling laughter, "I don't even know how I'm going to pay rent this month. My landlord's already banging on the door." I smiled, not because it was funny, but because I saw the way she tried to turn misery into a joke. "Then you won't pay it alone," I told her. "Not anymore." From that moment, I made it my mission to carry her burdens. Our nights were small but precious. We'd sit on the floor of my one-bedroom apartment, eating ramen out of cracked bowls. She'd slurp the noodles loudly just to make me laugh, her lips shiny with broth, while I scolded her playfully. "You're such a mess," I'd say, shaking my head. "Yeah, but I'm your mess," she'd reply, tugging on my sleeve until I kissed her forehead. I remember staying up until 3 in the morning, red-eyed and exhausted, editing her first business proposal on my battered laptop. She wanted to start a small fashion boutique online. She had no idea how to write a business plan, but I did. So I typed while she leaned against me, half asleep, whispering, "One day, this'll all pay off, baby. You'll see." And when she finally launched her online store, I celebrated harder than she did. I bought her flowers she didn't expect, and when she made her first sale, just a cheap necklace worth less than $20, I popped open a bottle of cheap champagne, just to see her smile. I remember the first designer handbag I bought her. I'd been saving up for a new laptop, but when she lingered at the store window, her eyes sparkling at that bag she couldn't afford, I made a silent decision. 2 weeks later, I handed it to her, wrapped in tissue paper. Her hands shook as she opened it. "You didn't, oh my God. You didn't have to." "I wanted to," I cut in. "I just want you to be happy." She threw her arms around me, tears wetting my shirt. "I swear, I'll never need anyone but you. Never. You're all I'll ever want." And I believed her. The sacrifices piled up, though I never kept count. My friends went on vacations I skipped because I was pouring money into her startup. I drove an old car while she posted photos with the new outfits I bought her, captioning them with inspirational quotes. I didn't mind. I told myself love was worth it. I told myself she was worth it. Every night, before I closed my eyes, I reminded her, "Don't worry about tomorrow. I'll take care of it." And every night, she kissed me softly and whispered back, "I know. You're my everything." I held those words like a shield against the exhaustion, against the doubt. Because when you love someone, you don't keep score. You don't measure how much you've given against how much they've returned. You just give. That was the kind of man I was before the betrayal. That was the kind of man she destroyed. It didn't happen all at once. Betrayal rarely does. It starts with little things, shadows on the wall, faint enough you can convince yourself they aren't there. At first, I told myself she was just busy. Her business was growing, her online boutique was getting traction, and she needed help. That's what she said, anyway. She'd look at me with tired eyes and mutter, "I've got to meet with my mentor again. He knows investors. This could change everything." I wanted to be supportive. I wanted to believe she was doing it for us, for the dream we shared. But nights stretched longer. Dinners went cold. I found myself alone at the kitchen table, staring at the second pair of chopsticks I'd set out, telling myself she'd be back soon. Sometimes she was. Sometimes she wasn't. I remember the first lie. It was a Tuesday night. She came home late, the clock blinking past midnight. I asked, gently, "Where were you?" I was worried. She pulled off her heels and laughed too lightly. "Oh, I told you, I was with my mentor. We grabbed coffee after the meeting." Time slipped away. But when I kissed her, I smelled wine on her lips. Not coffee. I let it slide. Maybe they'd moved from coffee to wine. Maybe she just didn't think it mattered. But it stuck with me. A splinter I couldn't dig out. The criticisms came next. One evening, I was rushing to get us out the door for a dinner she insisted we attend. She looked at my shirt, a plain button-down I'd ironed myself, and frowned. "You don't dress like someone successful enough to be with me," she said. She laughed right after, as if it was a joke. But it wasn't. I felt it in the pit of my stomach. I'd never heard her speak like that before. She used to call me her rock, her anchor. Now I was, an accessory she thought didn't match her outfit. I tried not to let it get to me. I kept convincing myself she was stressed. That she didn't mean it. But the changes piled up. Her phone became her second skin. She used to toss it on the couch without a care, laughing when I teased her about always misplacing it. Now, it never left her hand. When I walked into the room, she'd tilt the screen away. When a message pinged, she'd smile faintly, thumbs moving fast, and if I asked who it was, she'd shrug. Just business. But business doesn't usually make your cheeks flush pink. Social media told a story, too. I noticed her posts changing. When she first started out, she always tagged me in little things, hashtag thankful for my love, hashtag my support system, hashtag couple goals. People knew I was behind her success. She wanted them to know. But slowly, my name disappeared. Her captions shifted. Now it was, building my empire, or, self-made queen. Self-made. I should have been proud. I wanted to be. But that word, it cut deeper than any insult. Because I knew how many nights I stayed up, working spreadsheets for her, wiring money into her account so she could buy inventory, covering her rent when she couldn't. She wasn't self-made. She was us-made. And now she was editing me out of the picture. Then there were her new friends. I didn't recognize their names. She dropped them into conversation casually, "Oh, I was with Claire today," or, "Ryan thinks I should expand into a new market." Ryan? Who's Ryan? I asked once. "Oh, just a guy in the circle. Business stuff." You wouldn't get it. I wouldn't get it. That was the phrase that stuck. She stopped introducing me to people. If she had meetings, I wasn't invited. If she was networking, she went alone. I told myself it was fine, that I didn't need to be involved. But deep down, I felt her world growing, and I was no longer part of it. The gratitude faded too. When I surprised her with little things, coffee on her desk, groceries stocked up, her favorite pastries after a long day. She didn't light up anymore. She'd barely look up from her phone. Once, I handed her a box with a new necklace I'd bought, just because. She opened it, stared at it for half a second, and said flatly, "It's nice. Thanks." That was it. No tears. No hug. No kisses. She used to throw herself into my arms for the smallest gifts. Now it felt like I was feeding an endless hunger that would never be satisfied. I tried to ignore it. I tried to stay blind. Because the alternative, the thought that she might be slipping away, that she might be giving her time, her laughter, her heart to someone else, was unbearable. So I clung to excuses. She's stressed. She's tired. She doesn't mean it. She loves me. She said she'd never need anyone but me. But every night, when I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I felt the distance growing. I reached out for her hand in the dark, and sometimes she pulled it away. And the truth I didn't want to face pressed harder on my chest. The woman I made rich was already leaving me behind. The night it all came crashing down started out like any other. She told me she was going to another meeting with her mentor. By then, I'd stopped asking questions. Stopped fighting. What good would it do? She'd only roll her eyes, kiss me half-heartedly, and mutter, "Don't wait up." But this time, I did wait. I sat there, hours ticking past, staring at the clock as my ramen went cold. Midnight. 1 a.m. 2. I tried to sleep, but my mind wouldn't stop spinning. Finally, at 3, I grabbed my keys. I don't know what I was looking for. Proof. Closure. A reason to silence the gnawing doubt. All I knew was I couldn't sit in that apartment, drowning in silence, while she was out there God knows where. Her phone's location was still linked to mine, a relic from when we trusted each other enough to share everything. I pulled it up. A hotel downtown. Not an office. Not a cafe. A hotel. My chest burned as I drove. The lobby was empty when I walked in, but the sight of her name at the desk when I asked, the way the receptionist casually said, "Yes, she checked in earlier tonight with a Mr. Dalton," felt like someone had carved my heart out with a dull knife. I didn't even go up. I didn't need to. The truth was already choking me. I drove home with white knuckles on the steering wheel, fighting the urge to scream, to cry, to crash the car just to feel something different than the betrayal clawing through me. She came home at dawn, hair disheveled, the smell of cologne clinging to her like a scarlet letter. "Rough night?" I asked, my voice low, trembling. She froze. For a second, her eyes flickered with panic. Then she laughed. Actually, I laughed. "What are you doing up?" "Don't," I snapped. "Don't lie to me anymore. I know where you were. I know who you were with." The air hung heavy between us. And then, just like that, she dropped the mask. Her smile curved cold. "So. You finally figured it out." I stared at her, my chest heaving. "After everything I did for you, after everything I gave." "Oh, stop." She cut me off like I was nothing. "You made me comfortable, sure. But he's making me powerful. Do you understand the difference?" Her words hit harder than any blade could. "Comfortable?" I repeated, my voice breaking. "I built your entire life. I paid your rent. I funded your dreams. I stayed up nights helping you, believing in you when nobody else did." She rolled her eyes. "And I'm grateful. Really. But I can't stay small forever. You wouldn't understand, he's opening doors you never could." I felt the world tilt beneath me. "I gave you everything I had." She smirked. "And I found someone who can give me more. That's how life works." I can't explain the feeling that washed over me then. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was humiliation, rage, disbelief, all tangled into one. "So you're just leaving? After everything?" I asked. "Leaving?" She laughed again, cruel this time. "I already left, baby. You just didn't notice." And with that, she walked past me, heels clicking against the floor like hammers on a coffin. She grabbed her suitcase, already packed, I realized, and headed for the door. "Don't wait up," she said one last time, mocking, before she was gone. The days that followed were a blur. I sat in that apartment surrounded by ghosts. Her clothes still hung in the closet. Her perfume still lingered on the sheets. But she was gone, parading around town with him, her mentor, her investor, her upgrade. Every scroll on social media was a knife twist. Photos of her at lavish dinners, dripping in jewelry, captioned with smug lines like, "leveling up," and, "a queen deserves her throne." And me? I was the invisible man. The one erased from the story she was now rewriting. I tried to move, tried to breathe, but I kept finding myself back at the drawer in my desk. The one stuffed with receipts. Receipts for every handbag, every dress, every dinner, every bill. Proof of the empire I built for her. I spread them out on the floor one night, drowning in paper and ink. Thousands upon thousands of dollars. Hours I'd never get back. Pieces of myself I'd carved away just to keep her dreams alive. And she threw it all away like it was nothing. I thought about the promises. The whispered words in the dark. "I'll never need anyone but you. You're my everything." Lies. I thought about the way she used to hold me when she was scared, when she didn't know how she'd survive the month. Lies. I thought about how she cried when I bought her that first handbag, swearing she'd never forget what I'd done for her. Lies. Every memory was poisoned now, every tender moment soured by the truth. She had been building her escape long before I ever saw it coming. I wanted to hate her. God, I wanted to. But in the quiet hours of the night, when the apartment was too empty and my chest felt hollow, all I could feel was the echo of what I'd lost. Not just her. But trust. Faith. Years of sacrifice that meant nothing. I gave her love. She gave me betrayal. I gave her comfort. She humiliated me. I gave her my soul. She sold it for power. And as I sat there, staring at the receipts of my ruin, one thought began to take root. If she thought she had won, she hadn't met the real me yet. For a long time after she left, I let myself be a mess. I let the anger show. I drank until the world blurred and replayed her words until they were a taut wire inside my chest. I cried in the dark and tried to burn everything that reminded me of her, until I realized fury would only drown me. Fury is loud and quick, strategy is patient and quiet. I wanted her to feel not only the loss, but the slow, inevitable collapse of the life she'd thought she stole. The turning point came on a night no one would expect. I was alone in my office, my modest apartment in the story I'd let everyone believe, though the office was a front for several things: a holding company, a trust fund in my mother's name, a web of small businesses I'd built over the last decade. I had never flaunted it because I liked the anonymity. I liked being underestimated. Underestimation is a weapon. I spread the receipts on the desk again, but this time I didn't see any ruin. I saw ledgers. I closed my eyes and let the shape of the plan form, slow, surgical, inevitable. People who only ever saw me carrying ramen or fixing someone else's server didn't know that I owned 3 rental properties, a stake in a logistics firm, and half the tech startup that my day job contracted with. She had been fed from these sources: wire transfers through business expenses, small loans from a friend's LLC, a discreet credit card under the name of her fledgling boutique. She was so used to the flow of money she never questioned the plumbing. First move, I cut the flow, quietly, legally, immutably. Not in a dramatic, illegal way. I don't break things with my hands, I break them with paperwork and timing. I canceled the payments routed through the shell accounts that paid her suppliers and her personal assistant. I shifted the business accounts out of her control and into a trustee I'd set up years ago for tax reasons. The transfers were invisible to her, automated withdrawals simply failed, invoices sat unpaid, inventory lines went dry. Suppliers began to ask questions. She'd built a fragile edifice that depended on one invisible foundation, me. The second move was rumor, and like the cuts, it was quiet. Reputation is currency, more volatile than money, but once it collapses, recovery is brutal. I planted small, believable stories through people she trusted, a casual mention at a networking brunch that her investor, Mr. Dalton, was temperamental, a private text sent to a blogger about inconsistent fulfillment from her boutique. I made sure the whispers had a source she couldn't easily trace back to me, a disgruntled ex-employee, fabricated, a supplier with scheduling conflicts, paid a one-time settlement, a friend who'd seen her backstage with the mentor and commented on how quickly she'd changed. I never lied publicly. I simply accelerated the truth she'd already started living. Orders slipped. Returns piled up. Customers posted one-star complaints. The boutique's self-made veneer began to show the cracks she couldn't hide with glossy Instagram shots. Investors who had once courted her started asking for ledgers. When she showed them amateur spreadsheets and promises, they backed out. The mentor, the man she'd left me for, murmured the right words in private, "We'll sort this out." But he was busy courting bigger fish. Women like her were there for a season. Men like him are allergic to persistence. At the same time, I rewired perception in the circles she now flaunted herself in. I didn't attack her directly. I elevated other people's opinions of me. I started appearing quietly in places she frequented, a charity gala here, a product launch preview there. Never ostentatious, no, that would have been obvious. Just a subtle, well-placed presence. People began to say, "Oh, I didn't know he was involved." When a journalist reached out about local entrepreneurs, I let my publicist, a man I had hired once for a different venture, feed a measured narrative, conservative, successful, philanthropic. My name began to circulate in a different register, one that made her look small by comparison when their worlds collided. That's where she made her last foolish assumption. She told herself that success belonged to those who shouted about it. She didn't understand quiet power. Power that moves behind the scenes tends to dismantle stage by stage. She thought the loud, flashy life meant security. Flash fades, structure does not. I also cultivated a second front, a woman she would never suspect. Elena was not a pawn, she was an ally, a mirror, and when necessary, an instrument of exposure. She was wealthy, yes, born into a family that held sway over the city's real estate brokers, but she wasn't the kind of person who liked drama. She appreciated competence. She appreciated subtlety. I met her months before, at a gallery showing where I'd been pretending to be a man with little to lose. We bonded over a mutual distaste for pretense. She liked that I could be sincere without performing. When I told her about what happened, I didn't dress it up in revenge fantasies. I told her the truth, that a woman I had loved had repaid loyalty with contempt. She listened, then offered the kind of support that kept a man from collapsing, not platitudes, but action. She had connections lenders trusted, event invitations that mattered, and the kind of social capital that could fold the worlds together in a single evening without shouting. Bringing Elena into my life had two effects. She was a genuine comfort, our conversations were intelligent and unafraid, and she also made a statement without needing to flash money. Seeing me with someone who moved through the city with quiet authority did what none of my direct moves could, it changed context. Where she had once been a rising queen, Elena's calm competence made my ex's posturing look adolescent. The optics are merciless. Of course, there were setbacks. Plans never run straight. A supplier I'd planned to cut made a last-ditch appeal to her, begging for reassurance and promising new terms if she met the right investor. The mentor, Dalton, told her to hold for now, letting her believe he was still the benevolent benefactor. For a week I watched her stabilize, breathe, hope again. I admit to a brief, irrational pang of mercy. Part of me wanted to step in and rescue her from the self-inflicted ruin that fate and my hand were combining to enact. But the memory of her leaving, of the casual, scathing cruelty, kept my feet planted. Doubt crept in, too. Some nights I lay awake replaying choices, wondering if I'd become the very thing I'd always despised, a man who measured worth by the ruin he could cause. I asked myself if I wanted to be the kind of person who delighted in someone else's fall. That is the dangerous part of revenge, its seductive logic. It whispers that balance can be restored only by breaking something else. I answered that doubt not with slogans, but with focus. Revenge, I reminded myself, wasn't to watch her suffer in private, it was to make her understand the mechanics of what she'd lost, the control, the networks, the currency that cannot be bought in a single night. I wanted her to know what it felt like to be replaced at a glance, to be invisible in rooms where she once commanded attention. So I tightened the screws. I let invoices bounce. I let staff leave one by one because payroll didn't come through. I let investors pull offers when they saw inconsistent records. I let the mentor, who had been comfortable walking away once she was useful, realize he'd been playing with an asset that now had diminishing returns. When his patience ran dry, he stopped calling. She called me, panicked, to beg for help. You can cover this, right? Just a temporary loan. And I listened to the pleading like it was a song I had once known the lyrics to. My voice was calm. I can, but I won't, I said. You made your choices. There was no joy in the words. Only a measured certainty. During this time, I kept my public face unruffled. Friends called with offers to take me out, I declined most. I cultivated appearances that were brief and purposeful. I let Elena be seen at the right brunches and the right charity committees with me at her side. I let her network do the talking. She began to introduce me not as him who was left, but as him who had done things quietly and effectively. This recalibration of image is important. People are social creatures, they choose their alliances by perception as much as by merit. Patience was the cruelest skill I had to master. She began to believe in the fairy tale again. Dalton took her to exclusive events, whispered promises in her ear, and arranged meetings with people whose names she repeated like new liturgies. She got comfortable in the shine, and that comfort made her careless. The boutique, which had been built on cosmetics, cheap jewelry, and hustle, depended on a thin stream of cash. That stream dried up. And when it did, the collapse wasn't cinematic. It was banal. It was a line of angry emails. It was an offer rescinded. It was the assistant who stopped answering calls. It was a message from a shipping company that their payments were overdue. It was the slow, cold drip of reality filling the space her arrogance had hollowed out. By the time I decided to step back into her periphery, she'd started to unravel. The mentor had moved on to a fresher project. Investors had lost patience. The boutique's online reviews had deteriorated to the point where few people trusted its promises. The friends who'd been eager to be photographed with her were suddenly busy when she called. I didn't rush the final moves. I enjoyed watching the architecture of her life reveal its weaknesses under stress. There's a satisfaction in structure doing the work you designed for it to do. When reputations fail, they do so according to pattern. I'd laid the pattern, now I watched it execute. But I won't pretend it was devoid of human cost. Sometimes I missed the girl who used to snort when she laughed. Sometimes I wanted to reach across the damage and stitch it together. Then I'd remember the last night, her suitcase, the laugh, the coldness, and that memory steeled me again. There was one more piece to the plan, an ending that would be both private and public. I needed a moment where the truth of her exchange could not be denied, not to humiliate for the sake of cruelty, but to show that the economy of loyalty has real consequences. I planned a reveal that would fold in the circles she had traded into and show them how easily she'd been propped up, and how quietly the supports had been removed. For now, the city hummed on. Her photos still glowed on a curated feed. She still believed she had won. But winners are sometimes the last to see the score change. I had time. Patience, after all, is also a kind of power. When the moment came, I wanted her to understand something simple and cold: I hadn't been her charity. I'd been her architect. And architects don't mourn when a building collapses, they examine why the foundation failed, and sometimes, if the lesson is needed, they rebuild elsewhere. The rebuild would not be for her. It would be for me. And for someone beside me who understood that empires are made by quiet work, not loud promises. When everything I'd set in motion started to take effect, it didn't explode, it unraveled. Quiet, then steadily, like a thread pulled from a hem until the whole seam gave way. The first sign that the mentor was losing interest came in the form of delays. Meetings that had been daily became weekly. Calls went to voicemail. He answered fewer texts and then, one morning, he stopped answering at all. I watched from the sidelines as she tried to prop him up with affection and promises. He humored her at first, flattering words, a private dinner here and there, until he realized what I'd already known: she wanted perks without responsibility. She was drawing credit faster than he was willing to underwrite it. A man like Dalton doesn't tolerate drains for long. He's got investors and reputation stitched to his name. An indulgent mistress is only useful until she becomes a liability. One afternoon, after weeks of polite distance, I heard the final blow through the grapevine: he'd cancelled the last tranche of funding. No reason given beyond reallocating resources. In the world of people like him, that's the polite way of saying you're no longer useful. When the money stopped, so did the smoke and mirrors. Orders for her boutique's best-selling pieces started returning in a chorus. Customers complained on forums about delayed shipping and inconsistent quality. Suppliers sent curt emails about missed payments and refunded pre-orders. The assistant she'd hired to scale operations quit, citing unpaid wages and mismanagement. The boutique's bank accounts showed overdrafts. Credit lines that had once been provisionally extended to a pretty face evaporated when her ledgers failed to match the stories she told investors. I'd expected denial, of course. People rarely accept ruin until it's at their feet. But she moved through stages like a performance: disbelief, bargaining, anger, then a brittle acceptance that made her eyes hollow. She started calling people she once knew, pleading and bargaining. Friends who'd posed with her for glossy posts suddenly had more important plans. Invitations evaporated. She sent messages to former collaborators begging for introductions. Most didn't return her calls. Society is an economy of favors. When the currency runs out, so do the favors. The chic brunches that had previously been full of flattered laughter and shared selfies became quiet rooms she could no longer inhabit naturally. People who had once posted her photos only a month prior now scrolled past without inflating her feed with hearts. When she showed up at one networking event, it was like watching an actress arrive at the wrong set: everyone glanced, then returned to their conversations. She tried to laugh it off, to wag her finger and tell anecdotes, but the seams had opened. People who had liked her because of proximity to money now judged her by her capacity to draw them profit. When that capacity dimmed, their interest died faster than I'd expected. I watched it all from where I wanted to stand, not in her ruins, but above them. I wasn't cruel about it in a way that felt petty. This was a correction. She'd traded loyalty for glitter, now the glitter was flaking away and revealing cheap glue beneath. The public unraveling was embarrassing for her, yes, but it was also inevitable. You cannot build an empire on someone else's invisible ledgers and expect it to withstand scrutiny. The plan's crescendo had to be precise and visible. A private collapse is a lesson only for those who happen to be there. I wanted the lesson to be seen by the people who cheered her progress in the first place. I wanted Dalton's world to watch the girl he'd installed as a trophy find out she had been propped up by scaffolding he could pull down. So I chose the gala. It was the city's main charity fundraiser, a place where deals are whispered in cloakrooms and reputations are polished on velvet. Dalton's circle would be there. Her new friends would be there. Influencers, investors, and the people who filmed their life as currency would be there. And so would I, with Elena, quietly impeccable, and a presence that needed no announcement. We arrived late, slipping in under the chandeliers with the kind of calm that comes from knowing the room will bend to a narrative you've set. Elena wore a dark dress that moved like water. She didn't need to shout her status, the room knew. I watched her scan the space briefly, then look at me the way someone reads a page they like, with focus and pleasure. That look steadied me more than any drink could. There she was, draped across a group of people who used to turn her into the center of everything. She saw us almost immediately. The sight of me, not ragged, not pleading, but composed and accompanied by an undeniably influential woman, seemed to dislodge something in her. Her smile faltered. For the first time in months she looked small. I admit the moment landed as cleanly as I'd hoped. I approached her slowly, the way you approach a painting you've preserved for years. I let the room notice us. Conversations softened, and eyes migrated like iron filings. Her face tightened as she recognized me. "Fancy seeing you here," she said, too loudly for the space. Her voice carried the brittle sweetness of someone trying to perform strength. "Elena and I were just discussing the new redevelopment projects," I replied, as if we were talking about weather. Small world. She shifted, searching for a way to reclaim the narrative. "Oh, that's great. You seem to have things going on." Her words were thin, brittle with effort. She tried to summon the old confidence. It didn't take. I took a breath, and then said something I'd rehearsed every way for weeks but never used until that precise second. "Cold. Clean. Final. Did you really think you were the only one?" I asked, loud enough for the curved cluster around us to pick it up. "You were just a student. She's the master." Silence cut the air. Heads turned like seagulls. Her eyes widened in panic, then narrowed in calculation. She'd been Irish dancing on the stage of public opinion, but the audience had changed the tune and she had missed the beat. "You're playing with words," she hissed, voice low and sudden. "What are you talking about?" Elena stepped forward slightly, the kind of subtle front a partner provides without theatrics. "She didn't build an empire," she said softly, but with unmistakable authority. "She rented one." Around us, the murmurs began, little, sweetly poisonous things. "Is that true? I thought her financing was solid. I wonder who she was borrowing from." Dalton's cohort circled like sharks that had been fed and now were bored. The room smelled the possibility of gossip like a bloodline scent. Her face crumpled, not into tears, but into the raw rage of an exposed performer. "You can't," she started. "I can," I said. "Because I did it. I built what you used for props. You chose to leave the scaffolding in place while you collected applause. It's gone." I watched the color drain from her face as the implication of it all landed. The way people were watching her now was different. They weren't envying, they were cataloging. They were writing notes to themselves about the kind of person she was when the money stopped. Sparked by a whisper from a supplier who had been present at the gala, one of the small arrangements I'd made, someone cleared their throat loudly and mentioned outstanding invoices. Another voice, an investor I'd nudged days earlier with a quiet phone call, asked a pointed question about fulfillment timelines. In minutes, the room shifted from fashionably curious to quietly damning. She tried to laugh it off again, to make a joke about growing pains. It landed like a stone. She stumbled away, rushed to find a phone, and for the first time all night I saw the raw, unedited person behind the curated posts. Her trembling hand scrolled through messages, then she looked up and found Dalton's face in the crowd. He met her gaze for a half-second and then turned away. He had no patience left. The mentor who'd once kissed her hand and whispered drafted promises now watched, disinterested, as she hemorrhaged social capital. When the gala ended, she didn't make elaborate plans. She was left alone. No glittering entourage, no whispering allies. She vanished into the night not as a queen but as a woman with a suitcase full of returns and a phone full of unanswered calls. In the weeks after the gala, the collapse accelerated. Stores that had once offered to stock her products closed their doors to her pitch. Eye-catching posts received fewer likes. Dalton's name no longer cushioned her, it simply reminded people that he'd once been the reason she mattered. Friends who had been quick to stand beside her on red carpet sent platitudes when asked for help, but their real-life autographs of solidarity were thin. I didn't gloat. The satisfaction was not in watching her fall in a spectacle of cruelty. It was in knowing the architecture of the fall was true and deserved. I had not broken laws to do it, I had simply turned the levers that supported her life. I'd let the foundations reveal themselves for what they were, borrowed prestige propped on invisible credit. As for me, I moved forward with Elena at my side. Our life was quieter, not because it lacked wealth, but because we chose a company that didn't require public performance. We built dinners that weren't photographed. We made plans that favored depth over display. That was the point, to show that real power doesn't need an audience to be valid. One night, months after the gala, I passed her on a sidewalk. She looked up at me with a face I didn't recognize anymore, hollowed, aged by stress, and apologetic in a way that came too late. "Are you okay?" she asked, voice small. I kept walking. There was nothing left to say that would change the currency she traded. Behind me, the city lights blurred, and the lesson settled into place, not as triumph, but as closure. She had learned, painfully and publicly, that comfort built by someone else's sacrifice can be taken away just as quietly. And she had learned the most dangerous lesson of all: in a world where everyone counts favors, there are always other ledgers being kept, and other lovers with balance sheets she never bothered to check. I didn't see her again after that night on the sidewalk. Not really. Every so often, her name would flicker past in hushed conversations or whispered rumors. Someone had spotted her working shifts under a different name. Someone else said she was living out of a rented room with 3 other people. Her face never appeared on social feeds anymore. The glossy mask had slipped off, and without it, she was invisible. But me? I didn't need to look back. I didn't need to keep score anymore. Because the revenge wasn't just about ruining her, it was about freeing myself. I built her a life once. I made her rich, gave her the stage she danced on, gave her the audience she basked in. And she spat it out for something shinier. Something she thought was more powerful. But dreams built on betrayal never last. She learned that when the lights dimmed, when the champagne glasses stopped clinking, when the applause died and no one called her name. She learned what it means to fall alone. And me? I walked forward. Stronger. Colder. With someone by my side who knew how to build, not just consume. I don't think of her often anymore. But when I do, it's not with anger. It's with clarity. She said I wasn't enough for her dreams. Turns out, she was never enough for mine.